Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rugby Room, number 2, at McMullen's Irish Pub here in Denver, Colorado. And we're going to do a little review of the Six Nations, but today's theme mainly is going to centre around the military and rugby and the history of where they intertwine and overlap. What I've done today, just going to give a little plug and a shout out to a friend of mine, Simon Drakeford, who wrote this rather large tome on rugby and the military and its history, and this just is specific to Eastern China during the colonial period in the late 1800s through to the time all the Westerners got kicked out by Chairman Mao and his mates. One of the good things about this book, though, which increases its value, is I feature in one of the very last pages lecturing
the 1949 chart. Is that when you were in Shanghai?
Part of the kick out.
Yeah, but there was probably other reasons for that kicked out.
Oh yeah, just like my military career.
Yeah.
Anyway, so starting to my left, going to introduce Adam Veely, who was a captain in the U.S. Air Force intelligence. So Adam, just share with us a bit of your rugby pedigree and why rugby, and who your current allegiances lie in the rugby sporting fraternity.
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me. I learned to play the game at the Air Force Academy.
Yep.
I learned to play during intramurals, which is a series of sporting events by the people who are actually at the school. And so everybody there, the academy focuses on 3 things: academics, character, military leadership, and then physical activity. And so you're always doing something. You're either a part of an official sport or you're playing against your peers at the school. And I learned to play by playing against my peers. And then once I graduated and was stationed out in West Texas for a year and something long training tour, a buddy of mine knocked on the door one day at 4 o'clock, and I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, and he goes, "Enough of this, we're going to go play rugby." And I went, "There's a rugby team?" And the rest was kind of history. I started playing regularly there, and I played for 6-8 years, basically until I started getting assignments where I couldn't play. So my personal rugby allegiances lie with the Air Force Academy at the collegiate level. Go Falcons. And then I generally just enjoy the game at the highest level. I have really enjoyed watching the sport expand. We have MLR over here. We have U.S. players that are playing regularly professionally overseas. And so I really enjoy kind of watching it anytime it's on TV.
And is Star Trek requisite viewing for Air Force officers these days?
It was, well, when you're stuck in West Texas with nothing else to do, it was that or go drinking, and there's always time for drinking.
Well, that's Space Command training, right?
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
right. Yeah. You laugh, but those are my peers.
That's what they like us to believe. And awesome. Thanks, Adam. Welcome to the show. And we've got another Air Force, but from a different side of the Atlantic.
Go Air Force.
Go Air Force.
And Robbie Winter, so different rank. You're a comms tech with Air Force Supreme Command, Logistics Command.
Logistics Command.
Yeah, and over here, you're. I noticed you've put this little sign up. You're with the Pirates.
Shameless plug for
Shameless plug
Pirates
for
Rugby
your
down in Castle
local
Rock.
youth high school rugby fraternity in Castle Rock. So again, tell us why rugby for you, and your pedigree is quite long because you're also attached in
And I'm
some.
older. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And attached in some sense to Gloucester Rugby.
Absolutely. I didn't really have a choice when I first started playing rugby or got introduced to it. I was woken up rudely on a Sunday morning by my old chap. That's father in UK language, and literally went thrown in at the deep end and played for a junior club called Widden Boys back in Gloucester. One of 10 or 12 within about a 5-mile radius of the city. So I continued throughout that youth club and managed to get into the Gloucester system and played for their U8s, U15s, Colts was U19s back in the day. And I ended up actually fast forwarding and joining the military. I joined the Air Force, the Royal Air Force, Her Majesty's Royal Air Force. At age 19. But rather coincidentally, I actually played for the Royal Air Force U21s against Air Force Academy down in Colorado Springs back in 1989. Right. And this was actually the jersey I was wearing that day.
Still smells too.
I know.
You should have washed it.
It was quite a damp field, I seem to remember. Yeah.
So, and Gloucester, and what's the history of Gloucester and your relationship there?
Well, obviously, it's a major rugby playing mecca in
Yeah.
the southwest of England. Their soccer team, or football team as they call it over there, weren't very good. Gloucester City, I think they play in a minor minnow league. So very big. So right as a youth, 10, 12 years old, I would get a season ticket and go and watch watch Gloucester day in or week in, week out. And I was lucky enough to end up playing for their U19s and then getting into their senior team in
And they were established, was it 1800? And
1873.
so that makes them one of the oldest rugby clubs in
Yeah,
the world.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Probably along with Northampton, which was one of your teams over there. They're kind of a very similar kind of era club.
And I know you're trying to be humble, but they're quite high in the Premiership rankings at the moment.
Yeah, we're having actually a really good season so far. I think we're third. Maybe riding off the back of the Saracens being at the bottom because of their points deduction. I'm not sure whether that's a PC thing to bring up.
Are we allowed to talk about that?
Yeah.
But yeah, they're doing rather well. So let's see how they go. And
So your financial incompetence beats sporting prowess.
yeah, there you go.
And now, for our consumer audience here, your position was as a scrum half.
Yeah.
All right, what does that mean for our community? What does a scrum half do?
So,
And why
a
are they
scrum
significant?
A scrum half or a 9 is, I guess, the equivalent of a quarterback. So it's the person that's really got the smarts. That
Oh, man.
I knew
Why did you ask the question? You opened it. Oh,
but they really have to they're the guys that make it happen, make the decisions, and they're clearly the link between the big forwards that go up and win the ball and pass it to the faster backs that are more, dare I say, creative and
twinkle toes.
yeah. So my old man, he would say an expression that the forwards would decide who wins the game, and the backs would decide by how many.
That's great.
I like that.
Well, I think we'll move on subtly
Yeah.
from that, and hopefully Otis doesn't need reintroduction. But in terms of military stardom, he outranks all of us. Lieutenant Colonel in the Green Berets, and but also written this lovely book, and you run a business called LTO, which is about. Did you say thought leadership? Or
It is. So I work with thought leaders and I give them the edge so
Yeah.
they can achieve massive success. And that's an exciting thing to have. Working with people that are already successful
Yeah.
and helping them take it to the next level of success.
so
And don't hold my book next to your other mate's book because that's a
it's not a knowledge comparison.
yes. Ooh. I'm intimidated.
One of these books is going to get read. And then the
Yeah,
other's
that's
going to
true.
sit on the
There you
cover.
go.
It's just a fashion statement. So, just before we dig into military and Six Nations World Cup review, what we've got here is a bunch of pictures. And as we go through the show, what you're going to do is at random intervals, I'm going to tell you to turn over a picture. And the person on the picture will be a rugby person, either modern or historical, who's played at the highest level. So they've either internationally represented their country or they're playing Premiership, level rugby. The scoring system, so there is an honesty box here. Being obviously military people, you're all honest. And I'm looking for 3 pieces of information. So if you give me 1 piece of information, you get 3 points. 2 pieces of information gets you 5 points, so score on a try. 3 pieces of information will get you 7 points. And it's basically name, the military service they are or were a part of, and their rank.
Oh,
So
great.
if you can
Wow.
yeah. So Otis earlier in the week, I did give him a little pre-brief, and he said it's like kill or no kill. It's not quite that stressful, I hope.
No, that was the way we did it in the Cold War. Was the training of recognizing the tanks or whatever it was.
Yeah.
My squad leader would flip over the card, and that was your job. Was
How many
do you-
seconds did you get to
you
make
do
that
it
decision?
right then,
Like, right there
right
and then?
there. Yeah, that was the training. Was
Not much
to
pressure then.
yeah.
We did the same thing with aircraft silhouettes.
Yeah.
You had to flip it over.
yeah,
You had to
yeah.
know the platform.
Yep. Yep.
So there is some of these will have a bit of bonus information. So if I say there's a bonus point to be had, you can dig around, see if you can find it. If you have to call in a friend round the table, you can, but then you halve the
Can we
points.
phone a friend?
Yeah, we can only be one of these guys.
Oh, I can't use Mr. Google.
No. So actually, you know what? Let's try one now. So who wants to go first?
I'll flip one over.
Adam, okay,
Go on,
for
Adam.
one.
Yep.
Just careful with your beer. Okay. Oh, so it's the fella in green. Okay, that's who we're looking at. So
Yeah, I'm not going to do well at this.
Let's have a,
I can give the team.
there's American ones in here.
Right,
as well,
yeah,
by the
It's
way.
South Africa.
Okay.
And I think it's the big tight head
prop.
prop, and I'm drawing a blank on his name.
I'm not sure
No.
if that's
No,
a problem.
not him.
No,
Is
it's
that
not.
Chester Williams?
Yeah, okay. 1 point to Robbie, Chester Williams.
Yeah.
So we're looking for the service should be really easy.
Well, it was Army, of course.
Yeah, there's only one service in South Africa,
Yeah.
isn't there? It was the South African Defence Force back then.
Well,
yeah.
yeah, that's what he was
Okay,
saying.
well, you can have a
Yeah.
point each. Right, one more piece of. Actually, no, I don't know what his rank is. So that was a warm
He
up.
was a corporal.
You just make
You
it
just
up.
throwing that out
You
there.
weren't, was he a scrum half as well?
No, he was a wing.
No, that's.
So do I
He's
get
a
a
wing.
point?
Yeah.
So
He's a
I
wing?
think he played
Yeah,
in the
he was a wing.
'95 World Cup.
Yeah.
He's got jumpers on.
Yeah,
Look at his thigh. He's got a jumper on.
jumper cable.
Yeah.
You know those South Africans, they eat a lot of biltong. Pretty big units.
Yeah.
Okay, Robbie.
All right.
So that was 1 point, 1 point.
You don't need to move your Guinness yet, Adam. Let's have a look.
Oh, this is easy for Robbie. You can't
control.
believe this one.
Jeez.
Let me show the camera here.
Go on.
So we go. Any self-respecting English rugby supporter,
I better get this.
you
right.
better get all
'Cause
three.
There's
All
Did I
actually,
get all three guys in the
well,
picture?
that's Rory Underwood. He was Royal Air Force
Yeah.
Flight Lieutenant.
There you are, 3 points. So 7 points, 3 pieces of information, 7
You got some
points.
catching up to do now.
Shit.
Rory Underwood back in the day was one of the fastest wingers and one of the highest try scorers for the England rugby team. Ever. I think he played late 80s through to.
So was he in the Navy when he
Air
when
Force.
he
Air Force.
or in the Air Force when he was playing international?
Yeah,
also?
absolutely, yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah.
And that actually raises a good question.
Yeah.
Does in the English Armed Services, do they have programs where you can be a member of the armed forces and then go play at the highest level?
British Army does.
What we would consider to be an exceptional athlete program in the U.S. Armed
I mean,
Services?
I'm not sure exactly what happens there now, but the Royal Air Force, well, all the military service teams still have development programs all the way through there. You know, U19, U21 women's rugby is actually played in the forces more prominently now than ever before. But in terms of a pathway maybe to more professional teams, I've got a feeling there's an Air Force guy that's playing for Harlequins right now. Just kind of got into that. He played his first team game. I wish I could remember his name, but there's definitely like pathways if they're good enough. They decide that that's the route they want to take.
British Army, definitely.
Do they?
British Army and mainly, well, not mainly, you see the Fijians coming through. A lot of them reside in the UK on their military identities, but it's part of the recruitment package for the military. So there are actually a couple of faces in here, but they play in the Premiership right now. And back in the day, there was quite a lot of Army representation in various national teams. I think when the game went professional, it's tapered, and obviously in the 21st century, there's a lot of conflict out there, so some of that's tapered away. You don't see so much in the Navy. The Navy's quite short-staffed, so once they deploy, that interrupts your rugby career, which I think's selfish of the Navy.
Our Army has it down at Fort Carson.
Yeah.
You know, in Colorado Springs. That I was just trying to think of the name of the unit, but they are professional athletes that are on active duty military, and they're all ranks too.
Right.
And they play all kinds of sports from biathlons, rifle shooting, rifle competition, to weightlifting, and I believe the rugby team, the military rugby team, the Army team is not there. I'm trying to remember where they are, but they have that exceptional athlete sort of program like the Air Force.
World-class athlete
That's what it's
program.
called. There
Yes.
it is.
In the US.
That's
That's
the
the
name.
word.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
world class.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Have you any idea?
Yeah.
I think that number one, whatever you say is true is only true at the date that you say it. The world class athlete program is designed, I think, initially with the idea of athletes who are Olympic quality, and
Yes.
and there's so that you can train and you do military duty, and occasionally, depending on the political winds that are blowing with whatever administration, can extend to other types of sports. For instance, Ben Garland is an Air Force Academy grad who was playing for the 49ers in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, or two weeks ago. And so he still has managed to have a professional football career. A couple of people that I graduated with were also drafted and had different careers at different lengths. And really it becomes down to this, a lot of times, to the service of, can they justify what you do in your off time to allow you to do your career? And like I said, that kind of ebbs and flows. But I know that all the services, when it comes to things like Olympics and things that are very public and of the public nature, are supportive of that. Other professionals, less so.
So is that an attractive option for service personnel? So I know when I signed up, I couldn't get on the rugby field quick enough. Obviously, I did my basic training. There's no get out of that. But as soon as I could get on the rugby field, and one of my mates played Scottish soccer, and same, we could get out of sentry duty, scrubbing the shit.
You were doing it to get over. That's why you started playing rugby. Is that what you're saying?
I joined the military to extend my rugby career.
I mean, it's an application process, and I think there's a bit of a tryout also for it. You can't just send in an application and say that, hey, I'm Olympic quality athlete in whatever the sport, ski jumping, right? I don't think that's going to happen. There's a much longer process, and some of the sports I know they actually do have some tryouts that they run at various times throughout the year.
So are they linked up to like the USOC and the governing bodies of the sport? So the military does the back office admin with tryouts or athlete profiling, and then steers them towards the sport and then hands them over?
And then allows them to compete for the position.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of that the military, when you're trying to do that, will give you what we call permissive temporary duty orders to go to the Olympic qualifying kinds of events or the national events. But if you want to maintain in the program, you have to generate the results at those events.
Right.
And then you might get an invitation into the program where you can train more full time. But there's a lot of doing it on the side and at nights and weekends to get to that level, I think, first.
Is it a good recruiting tool these days? If you think back to the thing for me that springs to mind is Vietnam, and how the country seemed quite anti and the military, but is the athlete pathway a good recruiting?
It's a recruiting tool in a different sense. I don't believe it's recruiting athletes to join the service to compete. There may be one or two, but it's really a branding tool more than it is a recruiting athletes like you would to the universities.
Yeah,
I'm wondering what kind of roadblocks are in place now for that aspiring professional athlete at the 16, 17, 18, and he's mapping out his career, whether or not an option to join the military is probably going to be off the table for anybody that's going to be recruited, especially probably into the Premiership teams in the UK or across the world. I mean, I'm not sure what happens down under in New Zealand and Australia.
Well, that was quite interesting, because when I was researching this subject, it was almost, I couldn't find any Australian and New Zealand international players these days coming out of the military. Now, I know the Australian and New Zealand forces are quite small in terms of volume, so, and with the game going completely professional, I've spoken to a few players over the years that back in the day you could be university, so you have a college degree and do your rugby career. You've got to pick one or another these days. The rugby is very much a full-time career, so it's I think what we're trying to do is look at the overlay of why rugby's attractive and the military influence, but I don't think we're going to see high volume military personnel in the rugby arena.
Well, I would say, it's not unprecedented though, because just like what Adam was talking about with football players, once they graduate, being able to play professionally. So instead of going active duty, they go into some sort of reserve status. So I don't see why and an academy graduate who is a rugby player and receives a professional rugby contract wouldn't fall into that same category as an NFL player, although his paycheck wouldn't be anywhere near the same.
Yeah.
But the precedent is set for a professional athlete because it's a recruiting tool. It's a great branding recruiting tool.
Absolutely, absolutely, very powerful. So let's have a look at that. Let's switch over here slightly, staying on the military theme. There's a New Zealand military historian, and sorry, I can't remember his name, but he was talking about the New Zealand identity around Kiwi identity around rugby. Because rugby was a substitute for or preparation for war. And so I think we all know it's quite a combative sport. But with your expertise, what do you think about rugby in that sense?
Well, I'll go. I mean, I was going to let these two go, but I'll throw it out there and get the juices flowing. For me, the thing that I think is most similar is the reinforcement of success.
Right.
So in rugby, when you're driving that attack and you're drawing your opposition to one side, let's say, so we're moving across the field, and I'm pulling the defense with me as I work my way to the left, and then I shift my attack to the right, however I do it, and I get success, then I immediately pile on that success. Well, it's no different than in the Army when you break the lines, right? When we set our attack plan and we break the lines in the enemies, you reinforce that success and you drive through to defeat the enemy, the bad guys.
That's quite a big overview then in terms of game plan. If you look at game plan, game strategy, absolutely, you see a game of rugby, and I always say as a rugby coach, the space is where you've just come from, not where you're going to. So you're trying to pull the D over here, smoke and mirrors, whatever it is.
A ruse, a feint, all those sort of things that apply in a military attack that we put into a plan in a military attack. You do the same thing in rugby.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously, with strategy and planning, there's a certain amount of intel or intelligence even before the game starts. I mean, especially the higher up the professional ladder you get, the amount of data and analytics that you can actually see these days. So before you're going into battle what the strengths and weaknesses of your team against their team are. So there's a lot of similarities between the two, I think.
So we've got in-game strategy execution. We've got pre-game preparation. Yeah. Okay. And what do we know about the opposition and strengths and weaknesses and how do we attack and defend? Awesome. Adam?
For me, I think the two concepts overlap at the idea of culture. I think it is exactly the same culture that most people have in the military, that most rugby players have. And that is, before we ever go into a game, we know certain things are going to be true. Number one, it's going to be 80 minutes. We're going to be tired. We're going to be hurt, right? It's not a question of whether you're going to get injured in a career. It's how serious is it and how fast can you return. And then it's a matter of, play doesn't stop.
Right.
In the military, it doesn't stop until there's a natural pause, and you have to keep going. And the entire culture is built one of building perseverance and resilience at an individual level, because I am not willing to let you down or let you down or let you down, no matter how much that I am hurting.
Good point.
And in all military units that I've ever been a part of, the good ones have that commonality, right? You are there playing for everyone else, and you only accomplish what you accomplish by a team, and it's going to be hard, and you show up anyway. And so for me, that's the part that speaks to me, is it's the same camaraderie, independent of gender, location, service. Another rugby player, another person that you'll go to combat with. So
yeah, that's quite interesting, because I think rugby in the military, no matter, and I know there's different viewpoints around them, but rugby and the military, in my mind, are the two biggest global networks in terms of people who accept you for who you are. I've been all around the world, as you guys have, and I walk into any rugby environment, or you played rugby, or you're part of a rugby and you come, and this has been the exact same with the military. Everywhere I've been, I've engaged with military folks internationally rugby or otherwise, from New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, China, Israel, as well as the US and the motherland, France, and the acceptance is, oh, you served. Yeah, but I didn't do anything. Didn't really do anything worth bragging about. No, but you served. The fact that you did it.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of interpretation of value sets or character standards, which completely overlay with rugby and who you are as a rugby person. Do you find? I know Adam, you just spoke to it. Do you guys see similar parallels?
Well, I mean, in terms of globally speaking, you're absolutely right. I mean, you've got this global network and fraternity of military and rugby people that can actually, at any moment in time or any given time, strike up a conversation. And as soon as you've got those similarities, it opens up a lot of doors in terms of just communication with people and opportunities for anything really. It's. I know it's definitely two of the most important fundamental things that have created and mapped out my life has been rugby and the military, and I'm grateful for being involved with both of them really.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're spot on. It's one of the things I always fall back on is I had the opportunity to work with several different military organizations, armies, and defense forces over my career, and it's a similar aspect because my rugby career is much shorter than all of yours. But it's a similar aspect where those guys that I made those connections with, wherever they are in the world, I can always go back to them, or they can always introduce me to somebody else, no matter where I am. There's always a connection.
Yeah.
You can do the same thing with rugby. There's always a connection. Hey, I'm going to Budapest. Mm-hmm. And who do I know in Budapest? Well, I don't know anybody in Budapest, but I can ask some of the people, a guy that I served with in the Hungarian army that probably knows somebody in Budapest.
Maybe it was the original internet.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great way of putting it. A chapter in your book about get rugby in your business for it to be a high-level, successful business operation.
It is.
Or is that for volume 2?
That's volume 2, yeah.
So we got a question here from the audience whilst we're on this subject. And we've looked at a lot of tactics, culture, value sets. And on the value sets, which value in rugby as a veteran do you prize the most? Now, for those of you who don't know, the World Rugby markets rugby as a game of values, and those have been identified by several different home unions as discipline, respect, integrity, passion, and solidarity. So I should get out of jail card if you haven't got one.
Go ahead, Adam.
I'd probably say resiliency. I've been to a lot of rugby practices where great athletes show up and they last 1 or 2 weeks, and then they stop coming.
Yeah.
And you come up to them and you go, and a lot of people that I've recruited, right? I know some great athletes that come from the football world, and hey, why did you guys are crazy. That just hurt. And there's no celebration. There's no, it's
no celebration of pain.
Right. There, you don't, and like in our game of football, every play you stop, and then there's a chance to celebrate and to do and those kind of things. And they go, you just roll for 80 minutes, and it hurts at the end. And I'm like, yeah. That's why I love it. And they're like, no, that's not going to work for me.
A lot of basic training when you go through basic training is to flush out how much resilience you've got.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think that resilience is absolutely a value that rises up as people participate.
Well, that reminds me of one of my favorite phrases is misery loves company. And, when you're suffering in the stink and we're all suffering together. And that's one of the things that makes rugby so great is because when you're building that team and you're working hard in the training sessions and you're really pushing yourself, my mate next to me is pushing himself. And I'm going to push him and he's going to push me. And it's the same thing in the military when you go through, whatever that training course is.
Yeah.
Maybe not the Air Force where it's suffering, but it's.
Hey, not every place has a golf course.
That's true. Yes, not every place has a golf course.
We did have a 10-pin bowling alley at one of my Air Force bases that was owned by the U.S. military back in the day. Seriously.
So would you say that's a trust?
Yeah, it builds it's it's a human connection, I think, that truly builds within that organization when you're going through, when you're suffering together. It brings you closer. You look back at units that have gone through combat together,
Yeah.
and how that unit has a cohesion and a connection that is really you can't define it, but it's it's an overused phrase, the brotherhood, but it's true because of the suffering that you go through in that situation, and you have a commonality, kind of going back to that commonality of all having rugby as a base and all having military as a base, but you have that common experience which draws you together. And when that common experience is traumatic or hard or suffering, it brings you even closer together and makes you more of a tight-knit organization, which is a critical aspect for rugby success.
Absolutely, because it's not a game of individuals, it's a game
No.
of units. So you've got resilience, trust, and commonality.
I mean, the teamwork
Robbie?
element for me, because there's definitely been a transition in what my involvement with rugby is from being a player to going into more of the coaching world. So just from trying to understand teamwork and teamwork dynamics and trying to bring that to some leadership skills, that's helped me become a better coach and actually being able to apply some of those principles to my career outside of rugby as well. So some of the aspects of the values going back to like the teamwork and integrity definitely has a translation into the coaching model and what we try and achieve through that vehicle and involvement with rugby.
So let's switch around then and look at the rugby itself. So World Cup, we had in the Six Nations that we've got on now, you've got England in the finals, Wales semi-finals, so it's top four. England now sitting at number 4, I think, in the table in the Six Nations. Ireland, who barely didn't get out the pool. They just got out of the pool, got into the quarterfinals of the World Cup. They're now at the top of the table, giving the Welsh a bit of a thumping. The Welsh are top 4 in the World Cup, so they're sitting at number 2. So you'd sort of expect Wales to be in the top 2 right now. But let's look at that. England are about to kick off against Scotland. Incidentally, the oldest rugby fixture ever. 1871, the first game was played. So there's 2 records. Oldest rugby fixture. There's more in this game. 1871 was the first time these teams played. I think they've played 138 times.
We should give these an opportunity to win another point to see what's the game.
Mate,
what are they playing for?
When we turn over
today?
the Americans, I expect a full house of points. And then last year, what was significant about England-Scotland Calcutta Cup last year?
There was a
Tricky
draw.
one. Yes. Go on, expand on that.
Well, let's see. So it was probably the biggest point comeback ever, because Scotland was down, I think, 31-0 at the half.
Man, see, this is why you rose to the heady heights of Lieutenant Colonel.
That's right. Because of my rugby knowledge. Let's see, what else was there? Well, and Scotland, what was it? 31 unanswered points, went up 38-31, and then I would say that they rested on their laurels and allowed England to pull a draw out of it in the last. I think it was it dead ball, or it was very close to dead time when England scored.
That's impressive, Otis. So yes, England were 31-0 up at half time. The game ended 38-all, and it's the highest scoring draw in the Six Nations Championship.
Okay. Wow.
So looking at that very quickly, with your highs and lows of the Six Nations or the World Cup, what would you be doing now to prepare for round 2? So I don't mind which team you've looked at, Ireland, Scotland. You're obviously going to talk about England.
And the French maybe. But.
Otis, you, if you want to speak about Scotland, because I know you've sort of last week you said you thought England would win, but I know you've got a bit of a Scottish heritage. But I'm also interested in the fact that the first choice playmaker for Scotland, Finn Russell, fell out with the leadership.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a very interesting leadership and military overlay, and he's not in camp. So
He made poor choices, is what we would say to our children. Are you making a poor choice? Are you sure that's the decision you want to make?
So let's hear your thoughts. So round 1 to round 2, what would you look at, and what did you see rather? And if you were coaching these teams, what would you be expecting to do this week?
Well, I think just going back, because you mentioned the World Cup clearly, and with England and the success that they did have, and obviously fell at the final hurdle. But I see the pattern that's being established now is World Cup cycles are every 4 years. First round of the Six Nations is that development, and really looking at some of the players that may be approaching that end of their career, but they still bring the experience to the upcoming players that are being selected.
Yeah.
So just looking at England, for instance, I think it's well known that Ben Youngs probably didn't have his best game, especially from a leadership standpoint. I think he was left caught between a rock and a hard place, especially with the back row selections that they had, with Tom Curry being selected at number 8, and Don Brandt, the guy that's actually seems to be the leader of that position in England right now. But going back to the actual game itself, France they seem to be that team that are now free of the World Cup shackles and able to express themselves. They've got a lot of inexperience and a lot of uncapped players, so their expectations are not as high now. So they went out, they're playing at home, and they took England to pieces in the first half.
So that's really interesting, because you've got a World Cup finalist with like a 2-3 month layoff.
Yeah.
And then they go straight back into combat, and they know it's coming around the corner. It's not like it's unprepared. And you've got 80% of your combat force going into that first game against an untested or very young unit.
Yeah.
And they get hammered. They're dominated mentally and physically.
They got punched in the face. That's the way I look at it. I mean, they literally, France came out and punched England in the face. They said, hey, you pommies, if you want to do this, you want to talk smack, we'll show you what it's like.
You know the French nickname for the English, do you know what it is? Les roast beef. Roast beefs. So it's not quite pommies. That's the courtesy of the Kiwis.
Doesn't it happen in sport all the time, though, when you get the teams that are successful, and for some reason those underdog teams seem to be able to rise to the occasion because it's more of a challenge. So maybe they go into that game with a mental mindset that they got nothing to lose, so let's just throw everything at them, and they end up with a success.
It's double-sided, though, because the top team plays down, too. How many times have we seen that?
Yeah.
Where you're expected to be at this level, and you've always played at this level, but you play a team at this level, and you come down to them. I've seen that so many times. I saw that with my team when I was coaching.
It's like with France, it's like you dangle a carrot in front of them that you can beat the World Cup finalists.
Yeah.
So, and looking at Adam and Otis, looking at you two here in a senior management role, how do you manage that? You've had your leadership group underperform, and your operators, your troops, just being given a bloody nose. In your after action review, what would you be addressing, bearing in mind you've got in this case 1 week, but in a combat environment you might even just have a 48 hours, 24 hours, you're straight back into it. What would be your top 3 priorities to address?
I think the top 3 in priority order are leadership, and leadership. You can't change all of the buildup that you've had to that moment, all of your skills training, all of your small unit training, and then trying to integrate it into a game plan. You have to believe that if you execute the plan as you designed it, that you'll be okay. And if you failed to execute it, which is what I think that England is facing right now, you got to figure out why that was and try to make that change that allows your leadership to execute the way that you obviously believe that it can, and that we saw that it could in the World Cup run that they have.
Because if you look at the media, like to pick on the personality, whether it's a coach or a player, that realistically we're looking at the process within the plan. And you've got to dig into your plan and see, where did it break down? But is there any successes that come out of a failure like that?
Well, there always is. I mean, there's always those players or individuals that performed well,
Yeah.
and that you should recognize and build off of those things, or even those parts of the game that succeeded, that were good. You know, that sounds really funny. That were good, but that's what you got to build on.
Yeah.
But then you've also got to focus on those things that were failures.
Yeah.
And how do you fix those? How do you redesign it? What was missing? I think at this level, it is so critical that the mental aspect, and the mental preparation of the game is so critical, that if you allow any kind of self-doubt go into it, any kind of self-doubt that if I'm making a pass to Robbie to the right when he's running to the right and they're attacking left, if I doubt that Robbie's going to catch that ball, then I might not throw it. Or I might throw it extra hard because I want to make sure he gets it. And that might, So those sort of things, and they become a subconscious action that the lack of mental preparation and the lack of understanding and focus cause that effect. And at this level, that's the difference. Because if you line these guys up, the difference, the physical ability and their knowledge of the game are probably within a millimeter or two. Yeah. So the difference becomes mental. And how you get the mental right is the critical aspect of it.
So in rugby terms then, if you were the coaches or the coaching group of the England team heading into, because Scotland at home in Murrayfield, as like France at home in Stade de France, you don't go in there expecting an easy day out. I've been in both those stadiums and watched some phenomenal results and some amazing upsets. So what if you look at within the team, rugby team, traditionally you've got your 2, 8, 9, 10, 15 are your leadership group within the team. So what would you be saying to England right now if that was your team? One or two things with either your military hat on or your coaching hat on.
Well, I mean, it's a cliche to always go back to your basics and go back to what you're good at, and I'm pretty sure that England can do that. And right now it's 10 minutes in and it's 0-0. But there's a couple of things that happened during the French game that I thought were significant, and that was the Johnny May incident where he switched off. And would he have, just going back to that mental kind of doubt, and would he have made that decision to stop and not play the whistle? We were always taught to play the whistle.
Yeah.
So maybe a little shift of focus back to the basics and your fundamentals, because that clearly cost them a 7-point try.
Yeah.
But I made a mental note to not blame Johnny May for that, because in actual fact he scored 2 tries that were kind of individual efforts, and he reignited the English play in the last 20 minutes of the French game. And so those swinger points could have been actually a bit of a leveler.
And that's really interesting, because you could be the best trained human being in any profession in the world. Mm-hmm. And on any given moment, we're humans. You could just switch off emotionally and mentally, just out. You're out the fight.
Yeah. I mean, it's a split second of, your concentration just wavering, and I don't know what he was thinking, because I'm pretty sure he probably won't make that same mistake again. But
I think he even said it in an interview. He talked about how he switched off, and he knows that.
Yeah,
he
I'm sure it's
played.
I bet it's horrific for people to look back on that incident.
He was thinking about his halftime orange.
Yeah, it wasn't as bad as Campese dropping the ball over that line, because that cost him the game. That was remember that.
That shows how old you are.
I know.
So before we dig into Adam's three, Otis, pick us a picture. Oh, that's easy. That's
Where
easy.
Where are we at?
Here we go. I'll show the camera there. It's a very modern picture.
Yeah.
You not got it?
Nope.
If you get the full name, I'll give you a bonus point.
I bet you his first name ends in a vowel and his last name begins in a vowel.
Do you think he's Fijian?
Yes.
There you go.
All right, I'll give you the 1 point just for getting his Fijian. Right. Do you want to phone a friend?
Sure, Robbie.
Then you get to share the points.
That's all right.
I'm probably not pronouncing it quite accurately, but I think it's Fakunguni.
Samisa Rockadaguni.
Yeah, that was exactly what I said, but just with a slightly different dialect.
So give me rank and service. Are you both in this now?
He's got to be Army,
Yeah, British Army.
British Army, and he's probably, I'd say he's a corporal, sergeant, I don't know.
I was going to say Lance Corporal.
Lance Corporal.
Look at that
So you
face.
got
That's
nine-
a Lance Corporal
That's a Lance
face.
Corporal it is. It's definitely, yeah. He looks slightly
So-
underfed,
Yeah,
or something
that's
like
right.
that, yeah.
So you got the 5-pointer because you got the service and the rank. Bonus, very interesting story. So drop 2018, England, France, top performer in his position, top 2, top 3 in the country, gets dropped in the last 48 hours going to France. And this is a very, very rugby and military story. You're all going to get a chuckle out of this.
Go on.
Go on, you got just pull something
So he got called up to deploy to Iraq.
like you're thinking. Lives in England on his military identity.
Oh, he didn't have a passport.
Voila, yeah.
There it is. Yeah, he didn't have a passport.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah.
All right. What do you need? What do you mean? I need a passport, sir? You didn't tell me that, sir.
Right?
It's all your fault,
Yeah,
sir.
because he's used to traveling on his military orders,
exactly.
and France is like, what? That's in
Yeah.
English.
Yeah, sorry, mate. Need a passport to come over this side.
Oh man.
Right, Robbie, pick a picture. And not an easy one like last time. Pick a challenging one.
Just one.
Oh,
Just
well,
one.
well,
Oh, no. Go on.
No,
All right, you can have both of them. Go on.
he's Scottish.
So
I know
this one,
that.
here we go. Yeah, who's this?
Wainwright.
First name?
Greg.
Sergeant.
So it's Rob.
Rob. Yeah,
Rob.
yeah.
Yeah.
Rob Wainwright.
Rob Wainwright, yeah.
I'm pretty sure he was an army officer, wasn't he?
What kind of army officer?
Infantry.
Royal Army Medical Corps.
Yeah.
That's infantry-esque.
Yes, yeah, no. He was Army. Come up with a rank.
He was in the army. I don't really know my army ranks. Lieutenant. I don't know. Do they have
Captain.
lieutenants?
Captain. There we are.
I should have phoned a friend.
Yeah,
Should have
played for
maybe-
Scotland and the British and Irish Lions.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you 5 points for that one.
Oh.
Well, right, this one's a tough, but this is an American athlete.
It says her name on here. Getty.
No, it doesn't.
Getty. That's not her
Her
name.
name's Getty. Getty.
John Paul.
No.
Okay, so here we go. First female in there's more females in the and US. So you can tell plays for the US, handing off against China.
I don't know. Can I phone a friend?
Sevens?
Do you know?
Yeah.
No.
I helped you out on the last one. You
Yes,
should
you
help me out
did.
this
No,
one.
I'm saving it for later.
I
when you
put
know.
these deliberately in to embarrass you.
Yeah, I got
No.
no clue. I'm
No.
sorry.
Well
whoever that
done.
is.
Come on. At least guess the service.
Air
Force.
Air Force. Yeah, let's go Air
Army.
Force. Oh,
Rank.
I thought, is Katie in here? Because that's my one. And I know she's Air Force.
Lieutenant.
I'll give you that. Well done. 1 point here for Adam.
Uh-huh.
Is it a first lieutenant? Lieutenant, sorry.
Second or first?
Lieutenant.
Do you have
Lieutenant?
first and second lieutenants?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. First lieutenant in the army. Yeah.
Probably a West Point
Whoa,
grad.
whoa, whoa. You're checking your notes?
I get a name back to front. Just got to double check it. Casey McCravey. Okay.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, of course.
Oh,
Shame on
Casey,
you.
yeah,
Shame on you.
that's,
But 3
she was
points
here
for Adam.
earlier, I think.
Right, Adam, you'll go. Pick one. So glad this one came out. Okay, so this gets bonus points as well if you.
Well, obviously he's American.
Yeah.
Michigan? Is that Michigan? The Emperor? No?
Back then, it could be a number of things.
Yeah, yeah. So he must have played in what, the 1920 Olympics or something like that.
All right, so you get bonus point for identifying he was at the Olympics. It was
Okay.
actually the 24 Olympics,
24.
but he didn't play in rugby. But he was there shadowing at the Olympics compete. I can't remember the event he was in, but military and rugby.
Well, I'm pretty confident that day and age he was Army.
The M is a big clue.
Yeah.
The M. Try
Yeah.
it. Go with
As
what?
in the West Point.
M.
M.
Which service begins with an M?
Marines.
Yeah.
Ah,
It's a cat. Oh,
Look at that.
So he was a captain?
yeah.
well done, Adam. Well played.
So, Captain Henry Liversedge, U.S. Marine Corps, was at the 1924 Olympics, where the U.S. won the Olympic gold medal in rugby. But historically posted to Shanghai with the U.S. Marine Corps and created and coached the U.S. Marines 4th team and 6th team.
Shanghai.
In Shanghai, because they were part of the colonial military contingents that were out there on the eastern seaboard. He was posted Tianjin and Shanghai, with wanting to keep the troops fit, put them into the rugby arena out there. So I would argue first professional rugby players with the US Marines. So we now still go Scotland, England. What was your feedback points? So we've got to look at leadership. We've got to execute our process and be good at our part of the process on our basic skills. So let's have a look at Scotland. So we're now going into England are 3-0 up. We're in the second quarter. What would you have been saying to Scotland after last week? Because their performance against Ireland wasn't bad. And for one
It was actually
dropped
quite
puck,
good. Yeah, they had the game in hand.
Yeah, I feel like if you are Scotland, you felt like you should have won that game. That you certainly played well enough to win that game.
Yeah.
So your pre-game briefing for the Scottish team going in. So you've just seen England, World Cup finalists, go down to France. You've just been unlucky to lose to Ireland, who are now top table. So you know you can compete at top table. And you know that the other side, the English team, they're coming to your home ground, but they're hurting. So probably emotionally, mentally, and physically hurting. What's your pre-brief for your team?
I always go to my leaders.
Yep.
And because at this level, I go back to the fact that it's the mental aspect of the game. So that's where I would have the one-on-one meeting with my team leaders, my captain, and then the key players within the team. Not necessarily by position, but the unwritten leaders of the team, and how we can address those mental gaps that caused us to not quite be there, and then the fact that we can build on the realization that yes. England, although I don't think Scotland ever needs any fuel to get up to play England.
No.
I think it's in the blood. But how can they realize that? Yeah, they may have gone to the championship and the World Cup, but they put on their boots just like you do in the locker room. Right? Yep. So how do you defeat them? What are the weaknesses, and identify those weaknesses and focus on that. Yep. And design my attack plan for the game to focus on the weaknesses in England.
What would you do, Adam?
I think that Otis has hit a lot of the right targets. I think that if you're looking at Scotland, you can make the case that there are a handful of plays that go a different way. The knock-on going into the try zone being the biggest one that allow them to claim victory in that first game. And so as a group, I think you want to reinforce to them your style of play, which was very dynamic, very aggressive, put the ball on the ground and then get it out wide and then let the pack go and secure that, that was very successful, and that you can be successful doing that if you just clean up the handful of penalties, the handful of mistakes that were made that ultimately cost them the game. And then you can go more singularly to your leaders and say, okay, how are we going to be different, to better execute that and individually challenge them and get them going. It's not just I have to play better, but I have to raise the play. But I think if you're Scotland, if you can ever feel good about a loss, you don't feel like you're very far going into today, regardless of the fact that it's England.
Yeah.
I think just to build on that, obviously with the conditions that it's like up there, they probably knew that this was going to happen. And with is it Furbank playing fullback? This is only his second international game. I mean, I would just pummel that guy, put up the high ball, chase, and put him under an immense amount of pressure. I'm sure they'll probably get some results from that. But there was some other players in the French game that I think got rattled. I mean, people like Farrell. I mean, I would again just test his mental ability. Is he still there or thereabouts, or is he not on form? So
actually, that's a very interesting military parallel, because Farrell is a known leader of the troops.
Yeah.
In the arena.
Just play on that
infallibility. And they flushed him out, found a weak spot, and made him look ordinary.
Yeah.
Which quite an interesting parallel there. So actually that segues quite nicely. You're going to just stay on this subject of leadership and particularly military overlays and where it overlays with rugby. Let's look at Scotland right now. So you've got your first choice playmaker has a run in with senior leadership. Doesn't get selected round one, doesn't get selected round two. But in round one, you've got a brand new captain, troop commander, who goes in, makes the mistake that probably costs Scotland the game. And so going into round two, you've also got young players in so you've got less experienced with more experience going into a combat environment with also your star leaders, your star lieutenants or captains or sergeant majors or senior NCOs sort of out the mix or making mistakes. Who wants to address how do we manage that? I have no solutions. I'm just giving you problems.
That's a $6 million question right there.
Yeah, I mean, but it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's challenging them and seeing whether or not they're willing to accept that challenge. And as the coach, or to put it in the military aspect, as that squad leader, the platoon sergeant, platoon leader, whatever flight leader, whatever it is, how do you have to know what makes them tick.
Right.
And that's your job. So what makes each of those guys tick? Because it's going to be different. And some people, I can get up in their face, I can grab them by the collar, and I can get right up into them and chew their ass.
Yeah.
But others, I got to go, hey, man, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You did well, and, next time I know you can do it better.
Particularly the Air Force guys.
Yeah, well,
I'll
got to be
run down.
For you, Angus, I would grab you by
I can feel it coming across the table.
Just make him walk the plank.
That's right.
That's what he would have to do.
Okay, so one last round on the pictures, and then let's have a quick chat about the MLR. So who wants to go first? Otis. How many points you got right now?
17.
I hope you're keeping score.
I'm not. I said it was an honesty box. Oh, there's bonus material with this.
Man.
Let's hand it over.
French,
so we got...
it's a Frenchman, yes.
Right, here we go.
I haven't got a Scooby-Doo with that one.
That's Lou Ferrigno. He played the Hulk in 1970s TV shows.
He does have that look, doesn't he?
Right, so obviously he's French.
Yes.
What is that?
Okay, so...
Yep, that's about as far as I've got.
No idea.
So this guy's quite interesting. His name's Gerard Cholly, French paratrooper. Okay, I don't know any more than that, but the bonus piece of information in the 2006 Sunday Times review, a survey in London done by I think Stephen Jones, he was voted as the most fearsome and ferocious French rugby player that no one wanted to face.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's got, not only is he...
And that's his run out on the pitch face right there.
Yeah, I know.
Think about that. So I would agree with that.
That's because they took his cigarettes away in the changing room.
They wouldn't let him bring him out on the pitch, would they?
That was Serge Blanco. That was 40 a day,
man. All right, Robbie, one from you.
All right, let's have a look.
Oh, he loves his women rugby players, does Robbie?
Well...
So
Welsh.
3 pieces. Name,
I can only
service,
think of
rank.
one Welsh woman, and she's a singer, Kairos Matthews.
Yeah, it's not her. So let me
her.
show the camera. Okay.
I've got
Current-
no idea. Sorry.
I'll give you a clue.
Go on
Current captain of the Welsh Six Nations team. There's a clue in that whole sentence. I'm looking for three
Well,
pieces.
her name's not Alan. Is it?
We're looking for
Win
military,
Jones.
right? Military. Which one of those words in that sentence?
She's a captain.
Yeah.
I thought you meant the
Bill, yeah,
captain.
that's why you didn't go to officer school.
Yeah, there you go.
I take tests well, you know.
Building out from, so 3 points for Adam. Gemma Davies, Royal Artillery Captain,
I could
British
have
Army.
guessed it Davies, I guess.
Yeah, that's because she's Welsh. Yeah.
Davies or Jones, mate. There's not many options.
That's right.
Okay, Adam, last go. One for you.
Let's see what we got here.
Oh, this is an easy one. Easy one. Oh, you're being heckled. You better get this.
I'm sure it is.
To somebody.
You can't
That's
find a
right.
friend.
That's right.
Which English Gallagher Premiership team did you say you liked?
You know, let me ask you, Robbie. Who you know anything?
Would he play? He played for Northampton.
So let's say this was the last New Zealand military guy to have played for the All Blacks, as far as my research has found out, and one of the most famous for a very specific injury he suffered in the 1990s.
Do you know?
No,
Want me to
Part
put you out?
Maori,
It's
part Maori,
Wayne-
part Anglo-Saxon.
It's Wayne Buck Shelford. That
Yeah,
is.
name. Okay, 3 points there.
Military.
it's New Zealand Defence Force because
Yeah.
there is no.
Yeah, there you go.
They got no budget, but they did have actually. Go on, specifics. It's got to be land, sea, or air.
Land.
Army. Really?
Navy. So Wayne
Oh, he
Buck,
was Navy.
Wayne Buck Shelford served in the New Zealand Navy, played for New Zealand and Northampton.
No.
Long time ago. Then.
Yeah, but I don't know his rank.
Close
But I'm not going to tell you his injury on screen because it's really uncomfortable, and I'm not sure I can speak to it positively.
All right. There's
Okay.
a challenge. This is no. You already know all of them, don't
Yeah.
Not
he does.
necessarily. Joanne Faivisi plays USA Eagles Women's Sevens, Private First Class, US Army. All right, go on, next one. Pat Blair, Sergeant, USA Army, playing against England in the Sevens circuit there.
you? Sevens don't really count, though, does it?
Ataloa, Savisi, Fiji, and Royal Scots Guards Army, British Army. Go on.
Good memory.
It's one of your mob.
Oh, look at that one.
Corporal Alfred Burke, U.S. Marine Corps, getting his U.S. Marine Athlete of the Year award 1929-1930 in Shanghai.
Keep going.
I'm like the Spock of rugby, guys.
Oh, look at that
He's a
mustache.
Kiwi. That's a great
Yeah.
mustache. He's
All
a
right,
Kiwi. You don't know?
Kiwi.
Kiwi. Come on, Kiwi.
Yeah.
Sergeant David Gallagher, one of the original All Blacks, played in the 1905 tour to the US, and fought in the Boer War, and then signed up and fought in the World War I, was killed at Passchendaele.
Wow.
And the extra piece of knowledge there, 13 of the original All Blacks of the 15 were killed in World War I, either in Europe or at Gallipoli. So he was
13
the
of the original 15?
13 of the original 15.
Wow.
Okay,
There's
last
been
one.
a few Gallaghers, isn't there?
Yeah,
Kiwis.
that's Gallagher without a G.
Yeah. Isn't that
Now
Gallagher
this,
then?
come on,
Which one are you talking about?
come on.
The one on the right?
No idea.
One on the right.
No
Got to
idea.
get this one.
I can't see his bag.
On the right-hand side. Former coach of Munster. Current coach of the World Cup winning Springbok team.
Not
Rassie Erasmus, was in the
Oh,
South African
yeah.
Defence
There you
Force.
go.
So, cool, excellent. So we've proved that there's a strong military thread in all aspects of rugby, on-field, off-field management, and history, culture, value sets. What I'd like to do now is just speak to the MLR. So Major League Rugby 2020 is the third season. We've seen an expansion from 8 to 12 teams, so 50% increase in 3 seasons in professional rugby players. And if you remember last week, Luke Gross was telling us sort of the well is dry on American rugby talent. So we're now signing up big names from overseas: Marnonu, Rene Ranger, Digby Ioane. So this is the first round, third season. Very simple. Favourite MLR team? If you're watching it, just tell me you're watching. Even if you're not watching it, just say you're watching
it's the Colorado Raptors.
Colorado Raptors.
Yeah, I've got to say the Raptors. I think they're
So you
exciting.
got no choice, Adam.
I would go with the Raptors also.
Okay, so well done for being domestically approved. Second favourite team then?
I'd have to go to Seawolves because
Seattle.
Yeah, because their support is phenomenal. I mean, I know it's smaller stadia, but they're getting 20,000 people at a home
That's
game
impressive, yeah.
for the US. That is impressive.
Yeah.
Plus, they've had some pretty good success on the field as well.
Yeah. Cool.
Austin Blacks, because of the history of the club.
Right.
You know, it's been around for a long time, and it's neat to see. I think that's one of the things I really like about it is the fact that it was an original rugby club that's been around very strong that's converted to a professional club.
And so I would say, I do not have any great allegiances across the MLR. I love the Austin Blacks because I played against the Austin Blacks.
They're now aren't they the Gringolis or the Gringolonis? Been named after a cocktail.
Well, and again, clearly we didn't play against the professional side, but when I was in San Antonio playing with the Armadillos, Austin Blacks were in our league, and we played them all the time. And just to look down and to see that, it's nostalgic. And so
So if you think about it, that's actually quite nice. If you look a bit of culture there, when you and I back in the UK watched rugby go professional, and some of those teams that have had a club history for this long make a successful transition to professional history or to the professional game. So that'd be nice to see Austin last. I think the two things that, and bearing in mind all your backgrounds, just want to keep this on this subject of off-field business management, executive management. We've seen a 50% growth in teams, going into our third season, and the well is dry. The MLR was set up to develop American rugby players, but it's gone away from that already. Now it's a bit of a billionaire sport, so we may have a Saracens scandal down the road because, as I understand it, San Diego, Utah, New Orleans, Washington, Boston, New York. How is that? 7 teams? How many teams there are all owned or part owned by billionaires? No issue with that. But with this rapid expansion and the challenges with sports surviving in an entertainment sports market, has to be a TV. And Americans, whether or not they know rugby, know if they're getting a good entertainment product, particularly on a sports level. So just your top 2 things. What are you happy about around the MLR and what are you concerned about?
Well, I think initially with the signings that they've got, that does kind of ignite a little bit of excitement to see some of these players, maybe even if they are at their end of their careers. So that's going to be exciting for the rugby fraternity, at least, to see some of these players playing action. Maybe for the general public itself, is it going to turn into being fed by commercial sustainability? So you've kind of got to have that. What else is it? It can't just be 40 minutes each way of rugby. There has to be, I think, for the American audience, there has to be something else, whether that's putting in commercials during scrum time, penalties, that kind of thing. I don't know. So I mean, the money element, I think you've already hit on it. It doesn't seem to be a problem.
Not for all of them, though, but think about that. They're not all billionaire playthings.
Right.
Some of them are having to rely on investors, capital calls. So you've got a sort of a financial space race going on at that point.
It's funny when you were saying Austin, they've changed their name, it seems, to be like quite
Well,
frequently.
and what a weird thing.
They should be called the Austin Aubergine.
I wonder if
There you
there was
go.
a trademark issue or something. I don't know.
I notice, and forgive me for picking on you as a professional business consultant, would you say to anyone, you're 3 years into your startup, time for a name change or a brand overhaul?
The only companies I've known in all that I've worked with and worked for are the reason they've done that is a trademark issue. I mean, that is truly the only reason I could ever see, because as you're building momentum in your brand,
Yeah.
to make a change like that is a significant risk in your success. And so,
What do you think of the name change for the Raptors? I thought that was a positive move.
so I think that's a great move. So that's not nearly as dramatic.
Yeah.
To go from Glendale, which everybody's like, oh, Glendale, California. No, it's Glendale, Colorado. Really? There's a Glendale, that whole thing. So there was no recognition. But by changing it to Colorado Raptors, you're pulling much more of the state in. I think you get much more branding across the state. And I think that's an easy tweak because they're still the Raptors. So they didn't do a wholesale branding change. That's a tweak.
And outside of, because we're quite a saturated sport market here, outside of the Denver Broncos, the NFL team, all the other franchises are Colorado something, aren't they?
No, the basketball team, Denver Nuggets.
Okay.
Colorado Avalanche.
So you have
that's
the
hockey.
Avalanche and the Rockies.
Yeah.
Baseball and hockey.
There's a lacrosse, a Colorado
The
lacrosse.
Rapids
team, too.
and
The Colorado Rapids
Rapids,
and the
yeah.
Mammoth.
Mammoth.
That's it.
Yeah.
But that is a smart move to elevate to a Denver title or a Colorado title. I think
Oh, yeah.
And I think it has regional draw then, because the states that surround Colorado, have some affinity to Colorado sports when they don't have that sport, whether it's Nebraska or Wyoming or some of those things. And so, if you do by elevating it, I think it makes it easier to have a regional brand at that point.
So, sort of close this out then. So, we've got a 50% increase in teams in the league across a country that's a continent, so size of Australia. And we all know what state rugby is financially in Australia right now. So that's the first thing we've seen then is influx of foreign players at the end of their career. We've got to pay for those to come in to support the league. I also think about operating costs, 50% increase across 3 years. Is that a 50% increase in operating costs? So playing side or logistics side, whichever you feel strongest, what's your concerns or?
The 50% thing just rings to me is I'm wondering if the Colorado Raptors are going to get a 50% increase in people going to the stadium, because I'm not sure exactly what their maximum is, but it does strike me that there's not enough bums on seats.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I really see when I've been down there, and it would be fantastic to see, the stadium, Infinity Park, absolutely be packed.
But
And
equally,
you wouldn't need that many more people. I mean,
we want butts in a stadium, but you're not going to run a team on ticket.
No.
game
Well,
seats, are you?
and that's not where revenue's generated. Revenue's generated with the TV contract.
and that's where CBS, I think, have done.
Well, it's on ESPN right now.
Yeah.
The match is on ESPN News, I think, if I remember.
Yeah, and I think
ESPN News.
NBCSN.
Yeah, so that's to me, that's a huge leap forward.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that has struggled, because, and it's always been a frustration for me, because I can turn on ESPN and I can watch bowling, but I can't watch rugby.
Yeah.
And it's like, how is, or darts?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
What's that other game that the bean
Curling.
toss? The bean
Oh,
toss.
the cornhole.
Cornhole.
Yeah,
They
there's
show
cornhole on
international
ESPN.
cornhole championships.
Yeah,
It's
and
like,
not rugby.
Come
so
on, man.
without going down that path.
So isn't it interesting though? Is that
hit
the
a
fault
button
of
on me.
rugby or the fault of the broadcaster?
I said I wasn't going to go there. I wasn't going to go there. We don't have enough time for me to go there.
Adam, what have you got?
Raptors
Well,
just scored.
I think
All
that
right.
there's
Have the last word.
I think there's absolutely, the good news is that you're exposing more people to rugby earlier,
Yeah.
as a society, and I think that and we have a culture that already is in love with one combat sport, and it's a very short step to get in love with another one, and that will be good over the course of the next 2 or 3 generations in terms of the growth of the game in the States and the growth of our players. I think
Patience.
right, but I do think that that the business and historical reality is most professional leagues in the United States go through several fits and starts before they hit critical mass. And so, you can look at it and go, well, half the league is funded by billionaires. Well, that just tells me the other half are probably going to have cash flow issues at some point, and how they navigate that will have a huge impact on the competitive balance of the overall league. And so it'll be interesting to see that play out. I would, from a purely historical standpoint, I would say, great, you've expanded, now contraction is coming at least once.
Well, and to pull it back into the business aspect is, how do you create raving fans in the literal sense? That's what we want. We want somebody that is going to stop their Saturday morning and watch that match. We want somebody when they're home that is going to go to that match and spend money in the stadium.
And surely that has to be a homegrown talent. Because I know who Ma Nonu is. I know who Matthew Bastereau is.
But that's where it starts.
Right.
But see, so you're an early adopter raving fan. We are early adopter raving fans. So how do you get it out and you start to bring in more raving fans?
I think called raving something.
You kind of picked up on it, though. It's like going back full circle to when we first started. I started playing at 7. I didn't really have a choice. But the point is that the younger that we introduce the youth in our in this country to the game, then all they're going to do is just generate more and more and more and more interest, and that's where I would.
And could they do that in Castle Rock somewhere?
That's what we're doing right now. Youth all ages.
Pirates Rugby in Castle Rock, Colorado.
So I don't know how. I want to close out on something that's relevant. You've got the English Premiership with the Saracens and the salary cap issue. So Saracens is a one of the original Premiership teams is now down in the Championship. Might fold. So my concern, I don't know how, if this is media savvy, but I want to throw this one out there. Matthew Bastereau played for Toulon, €500,000 salary. Ma Nonu played for the All Blacks, played for Toulon, up there in a 300,000 to 500,000 salary bracket. Ben Foden played for Northampton, played for England, same thing, 200 to 300,000 salary bracket. But the salary cap for the highest paid player in the MLR is $40,000. Who would like to close out? That's my biggest concern. Are we going to have a Saracens in the third year of the MLR? Are we going to have a Saracens-style salaries cap scandal, blow the whole thing out the water?
Do the military pay more than that? Is there an option for them to go in the
Matthew
military? Matthew
Bastereau signed up for the US Army.
Maybe you can get 50 out of them. I don't know.
I like your thinking. Okay, very quickly, because we're sort of close to time, so...
if you're an early adopter, you have to believe. You have to believe in the goodness and the character.
Yep.
Are there spoilers? Is there a bad apple in the barrel?
Yeah.
You never know until it comes out, like what happened with Saracens. Look how long that club's been around.
Yep.
Are you saying that the Saracens club has always been this way, or did they have, the last 2 years, they've broken the rules? I was going to say fudged it a little bit, but no, they knew what they were doing, right?
Apparently.
So it's an integrity aspect, and I don't know about you. I'm sure y'all feel the same way, but generally speaking, I trust people.
Yeah.
And you have to do something to break that trust. So I'm going to trust that the owners and the team managers are going to do the best for the team, the players, and the league.
And trust that they've actually know their business.
Yes.
And because we've all seen several failures or half attempts at professional rugby here, and we don't want another one. So that's a good sum up, Otis. So, and coming back to the military, and we talked about values, trust and integrity is enormous, and we got a great competition here, and startups are hard and take a lot of capital investment, and we all understand that. But let's
and a lot of belief.
a lot of belief, a lot of trust, but a lot of rugby passion in the US. So let's, MLR folks, let's look around the corner and make sure you're here in 5, 6, 7 years' time. All right, gents. Adam,
Thank you.
thank you very much for your time. Robbie,
Pleasure.
well done.
Thanks for having me.
Robbie.
Thank you.
Enjoy your Guinness. Just if you want to test the bar. So thank you again to Mick Mullins Irish Pub, Englewood. It's part of Denver, Colorado.
mate.
Come down here because the time to pour a pint of Guinness is 119.5 seconds for a perfect pint of Guinness. Mick Mullen claims his is the best pint of Guinness in town. So this is where you need to be to test that. Well done, Mick.